You cannot outsource your relationship with God. You cannot outsource the mentoring, the pouring into the lives of your children to that next generation. Talks about passing them on. So before I jump into the statistics, I want us to see three things that I gleaned from this passage briefly in the time I have with you. And the first thing is the necessity of sharing your faith. And it's found, number one, if you're taking notes, I see many of you are, and I encourage you to do so. Number one, let's talk about sharing their faith. It says to repeat them to their children. It's interesting. It doesn't say tell them. It says repeat them. Why? Because there's an ongoing communication. We were loving the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. And then it reminds us to repeat them, to say again, children need to hear. When we talk about understanding and learning stages, we know that at an early age, children can hear, can know, and can do. They need to hear, know, and do. They need to hear you. They need to hear you repeating that over and over and over again. Now, part of the challenge is to make sure they're hearing a clear proclamation of the gospel in our own speech as well. See, part of the difficulty is that because as Christians we are, I hope, transformed and redeemed by the power of the gospel. Therefore, we live lives that are made new in Christ. And much of those lives, part of that life has to do with changed behavior. Sometimes what we can solely focus on is that changed behavior. And what we teach our children inadvertently is moralistic therapeutic deism. We teach them that the gospel of Jesus Christ is sin management when the gospel of Jesus Christ is new life lived out. Hear, know, and do. But it's interesting when you look at this next section of the passage, it talks about how we live life. So the second thing, if we're talking about the necessity, if we're talking about the picture of sharing the faith, the second thing is living a life. It's living a life. It says, talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them be a symbol on your forehead. We're familiar with some of the ancient traditions of binding them as a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead. But I want you to notice this is just simply talking about passing on our understanding of the gospel, of living the life that Christ would have us to live. But it's talking about it in the rhythms of life. It could not sound more ordinary in this passage. It says to talk about them. Just talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. It's just saying when you're living life, it's the natural rhythms of life. You want to lead your children to follow Christ. I want you to. I believe that with all of my heart. That's a joyous day when I was able to share once again and clearly see my oldest daughter respond by faith through grace to respond to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's so important. But I want you to see this. This is describing a life lived in right relationship with God. And this is it. You want to lead your children to follow Christ? Great. But you cannot lead what you do not live. And so the challenge for us is to recognize the importance of our own life. We're going to see in the statistics just a minute how important it was that we lived what we seek to lead them to do.